If you were listening yesterday, you will have heard me engaging with Mark Littlewood. Now, who is Mark Littlewood? He is Director of Popular Conservatism and former Director of the Institute of Economic Affairs. And I was trying to engage Mark Littlewood in a conversation about £10 million of our money that has been lavished on former Prime Ministers. If you're a former Prime Minister, you get to claim over £100,000 a year. And it's in order that you can run an office, that you can respond to emails and inquiries, that you can organise whatever it is that is required of you, because forever you will have been a Prime Minister and there will be demands on your time. I tried to say to Mark Littlewood, oh, Mark, nobody asked us, nobody told us, isn't it too lavish, isn't it a waste of our money, isn't it deplorable? He said, well, I can think of far worse and more egregious wastes of our money that we're not told about, we're not asked about. I said, you can? He said, I definitely can. I said, could you come up with 5? He said, 5? I'll come up with 10. I said, would you? He said, I will. I said, would you join me again on the show tomorrow? He said, yes. So just 24 hours ago, we had that conversation. He has delivered on his promise. And in my hand, I'm holding Mark's top 10 examples of the government playing fast and loose with our money and wasting it hand over fist. Of course, lovely listener, I am going to want to hear from you on this. So obviously I want to hear your response to what Mark thinks is a waste of our money, but I also would like to hear your own examples of your opinion in which the government is wasting our money or spending our money without asking us, without referring to us, and without giving us any chance to say don't do it. So the number's 0345 606 0973. I've got pen in hand, so I can work through the top 10. You might want to pick up a pen if you've got the chance and write down the ones that you are most outraged by. Mark, hello. Thank you. Certainly did your homework.
I've done a bit of it, Vanessa. Yeah, just to say, these are some pretty broad brush numbers. And I've looked for big ticket items, right? So I dare say I could find things where the government has wasted £100 here or £1,000 there. But I set myself the task of balancing the budget this morning. So I've tried to find tens of billions of pounds worth of savings. So big ticket items. That's what I've been looking for. And by my calculations, if you rattle through my list, I can solve Rachel Reeves' black hole by the time of the next budget. Right.
Okay. So lovely listener, if you've got a pen, pick it up. I've got one in my hand. We're going to go through the list of Mark's top 10 examples of the government wasting our money. So I'll read what you've typed, Mark, and then you can expound and expand upon it. So number 1 is freeze public sector pay until productivity improves and we are no longer running a deficit, saving about 50, how much? 5 billion pounds per annum? Tell us about that.
Yeah, probably at least that. So what we've seen public sector pay continue to go up. That's to say people who work for the state, whether that's the National Health Service, the education system, the civil service, local government. But economists try to measure productivity. You know, if you're working in the NHS, are you carrying out more operations or those operations more quickly? If you're working on the railways, are the trains all running on time, much better than they were last year? And productivity has not improved. So we've awarded public sector workers despite the fact that their performance hasn't improved. You wouldn't typically see that in the private sector. If a private sector company was performing badly, you wouldn't expect typically speaking, the workers to get a pay rise. Yeah. So I have calculated, if I've got this right, we spend, roughly speaking, about £240 billion a year on public sector pay. I've been mean on myself. I'm not including things like pensions in this. So let's say that public sector pay was going to go up 4% each year, there or thereabouts. That's roughly what we've been witnessing. I'm saying 0%. I've just saved you £10 billion per annum.
Wow, that was easily done, wasn't it? Although there'll be lots of public sector workers listening right now who don't like the cut of your jib one bit. Let's go to your second example. You say reduce the civil service back to 2016 numbers. That's 384,000 rather than 513,000. And you say the savings would be well above £4 billion a year.
Yep. So, again, I'm not throwing us back into some Dickensian dark age. I'm just suggesting we go back to the number of civil servants we had, less than a decade ago. Somehow the civil service has ballooned by more than 100,000.
Can I ask you something? When you say somehow it's ballooned, do you have any theories about why it's ballooned?
COVID was a colossal increase in public sector workers, which we then didn't unwind afterwards. So we sort of drafted in vast numbers of people. It was typically ticking up anyway. The coalition government under David Cameron was able to get it down a bit, but then it's been edging up anyway and took a big leap forward after COVID, and we didn't unwind it afterwards. So we've got, I'm suggesting, in the region of 120, 130,000 additional civil servants that we should be able to cut back to our 2016 levels. I've assumed an average civil servant's on £34,000 a year. My savings would be at least £4 billion a year. And I haven't factored in things like we would no longer be contributing to their pensions and that sort of stuff. That's just the salary. So I'm being a bit mean on myself by saying that's £4 billion. That's just taking the civil service back to its size in 2016. Should be simplicity itself. Another £4 billion at least saved.
And I did read a piece in one of the broadsheets this week, actually. Did you see the thing about civil servants saying, I'm going mad with boredom, I've got nothing to do, I'm not doing anything? Did you see that one?
Yes, and we should therefore release them into the private sector.
All right, let's go to number 3 on your list. And I wonder, lovely listener, what you're making of this. I hope you've got a view, because I'd love to hear from you. 0345 606 0973. So number 3 on Mark's list: instruct the NHS that they must find 1% of savings within their budget. Savings about £10 billion a year compared with the current increase on spending.
Yeah, so I think we need to inject a bit of kind of private sector style efficiency into our public services that are struggling. It would not be difficult for a major company to go through all of its numbers and to cut out 1% of wastage. I think the NHS is particularly inefficient. I know it's beloved by many because it's saved many of us on many occasions.
Yes.
But the overall NHS budget is now nudging around £200 billion. I reckon you must be able to easily find £2 billion of savings there, rather than putting it up 4% and throwing more money at it. So I'm making a net saving of £10 billion per annum by just asking every NHS trust to find 1% of efficiency savings, another £10,000 million saved if we just do that.
Number 4, switch state pensions to a guarantee they will rise with inflation or just above, rather than be triple locked. And that's a decent saving if you do that. On the other hand, that'd be incredibly unpopular, wouldn't it?
Well, I wonder why it would be so unpopular. So here's my guarantee to everybody on the state pension. I promise you, every year, you will be able to buy more with your state pension than you could previous year. So if you're wholly reliant on the state pension, you will be getting richer every year. You'll be able to buy more stuff every single year until you shuffle off this mortal coil. I will peg it to inflation, just perhaps a nudge above inflation. So if prices are going up, say 2%, you might get a 2.1, 2.2% rise. So you're going to get richer. That's my promise. However, I'm not going to make you, I'm not going to have you get the triple lock, which goes up either with wage growth or 2.5% or inflation, whichever's the highest. Because if inflation's 0%, for the sake of argument, you don't really need a 2.5% pay rise, right? And if wage growth is 12%, it doesn't necessarily mean prices are going up by 12%. So I'm saying peg it to inflation, possibly a nudge above it, just a decimal point perhaps above that. And a rough calculation, again, I've been, I think, a bit mean on myself. We'd save £800 million per annum, but we would still be able to guarantee that the state pension would stretch further every single year into the future.
All right. Your next suggestion, half the foreign aid budget.
Yeah, I think that,
and that's a sizable thwack of money saved if you do that. Also very, very popular with some, a real vote pleaser, but very, very unpopular with others, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not courting popularity here, Vanessa. I'm just trying to do the math.
Yeah.
So foreign aid spending next year is likely to be about 15 billion. I know a lot of people would say just axe it, get rid of it, kill it off. Again, I've taken a much more modest approach. Let's assume, I think rather generously, but let's assume that half of our foreign aid spending is money well spent. Well, let's get rid of the other half. I've just saved you £7.5 billion per annum.
Okay, so your next suggestion is this, and this might be very controversial: reduce total expenditure on sick and disabled people of working age to target it to those who really need it. Cut it from 44 billion per annum to 25 billion per annum. 23% of the working population are supposedly disabled. It would save £19 billion per annum. But this is very difficult, isn't it? Because here we get embroiled in mental health as well as physical health, mental ill health, people who, just cannot work because they're not well enough mentally. And what's going to happen to those people if you halve the budget?
Well, I'm not suggesting that we halve the amount each and every person gets. I'm probably suggesting we halve the number of people who actually get the benefit, right? So I'm readily accepting that there are a good number of people who are sick or have huge mental health problems or are disabled who cannot work. And I'm retaining a pretty chunky budget for that, £25 billion per annum. But I don't accept, in at least layman's terms, the figures that we have at the moment, that 9.8 million people of working age, that's to say 23% of all people of working age, are apparently disabled. I mean, that strikes me as an enormous exaggeration of the total number. So I haven't even halved it. I'm still being generous here. I'm knocking off what is about 40% of that bill and tasking the Department of Work and Pensions of saying, you've got to get this to the people who really need it, not people who are saying they're feeling depressed for a while or are swinging the lead. But we'll keep a good £25 billion back for the people who really need it. And I don't believe that some unbelievable virus or disease or mental health wave has swept through the British population. I mean, it's gone unreported. Why are we sicker and iller and more disabled than we ever were before? Not much good evidence to believe we are. So I think we can find £19 billion a year of savings there, whilst making sure there is a good pot of gold to get to the people who really need it.
Is this not fair because you're not factoring in the cost of trying to establish which of the people currently claiming the benefit do deserve it and which don't deserve it? And isn't it the kind of thing that is incredibly unpopular with relatively good reason, because it means saying to people who say, I can't walk, I can't lift my arms above my head, I'm desperately unhappy, I can't get out of bed, I'm, whatever. Okay, well, let's see how you do up your own bra. Let's see if you can run a bath. Can you get into a shower? It's humiliating. It's dehumanizing. People dread it. They get so terribly upset in advance of it, and it costs money to do it, doesn't it? And so, isn't this the one that people are going to dislike the most?
It might be. I think it's also the one that's the most important to make savings on, because it seems to me it's out of control and the system isn't working. We can't just have self-reporting, right? You can't just put your hand in the air and say, I've got terrible mental health problems, I've got a terrible bad back, I can barely stand up in the morning, without there being any independent check. I don't think you have the right just to assert that and for us to take it on trust. So we already spend quite a lot on the system of processing it. We don't take it on trust. And I'm saying that we just need to nuance that system a bit. I'm trying to knock out about 40% of the people, there or thereabouts, who claim it, and make sure we get the money, potentially a bit more money, to the people who really need it. If you could halve the number of people on the roll, right, you could potentially get more support to those who really need it. But this has got spiraled out of control. I mean, to put the number in context, the amount we're spending on ill or disabled people in the workforce per annum is £44 billion. What's that coming at? That's about, we're contributing, what's that, about £800 per person per year to that.
We've got through 6, we've got 7, 8, and 9 to go. So here we go, Mark. Reduce government savings on cultural activities from £4.7 billion a year to 0.7, which would be a saving of £4 billion a year. What kind of thing do you mean by cultural activities?
Yeah, that's good. And sorry, there was a typo in my memo to reduce government spending on cultural activities. So cultural activities will be things like subsidising the arts, subsidising sport, subsidising festivals, organising fireworks displays, all of that kind of thing. It's not a massive part of government expenditure, but it seems to me the sort of thing you should trim back on if you're finding that the government financiers are in some sort of trouble. So again, a bit like with foreign aid before the break, I haven't killed it altogether. I'm guessing when President Trump comes over for his state visit, we probably do need to hire somebody to have a trumpet and play the Star Spangled Banner and wave a US flag or something. So I'm going to leave a full $700 million behind for the necessities. But the rest of it should be left to individual men and women to decide what they want to do culturally. It's money the government doesn't have. I think culture should be in the hands of the people much more than the government. So if you're willing to stop subsidising rich people going to the English National Opera, amongst other things, I think I can find you £4 billion worth of savings every year.
And then people will say, what did the Romans say the people wanted? Bread and circuses. And circuses is firework displays, and circuses is, subsidised sport, subsidised theatre, all the sorts of things that make life worth living, that are the icing on life's cake.
Well, generally speaking, I think the circuses don't need much subsidy, actually. The most popular entertainment and the most beloved entertainment in Britain doesn't tend to be subsidised entertainment. I've just come back from a football game on the South Coast. It stands on its own 2 feet. There was no government subsidy for it. And I think unsubsidised cinema tends to be more popular than subsidised movies. So, yeah, I'm afraid the subsidies will end. And those tend to be subsidies that actually tend to fall to the benefit of the rather more affluent middle classes at the expense of rather poorer people. So I think I'm also striking a blow for equality here as well as saving money.
So your next one, this is number 8 of 10, reduce subsidy to the railways from 12.5 billion to 10 billion. And you say railways are typically used by the more affluent. So any subsidy here is still in the round. A transfer from poor to rich people, this would be a considerable saving, £2.5 billion.
Yeah, and again, I haven't gone the whole hog. I'm accepting slightly reluctantly that rail can't stand on its own 2 feet as a commercial enterprise. I'm just making a bit of a trim here. Rather than £12.5 billion worth a year of subsidies, let's just cut that back to 10 billion. Let's focus that on areas which are almost wholly reliant on rail, but let's not subsidise fairly affluent commuters like me taking a journey from Clapham Junction to either London Victoria or London Waterloo every day.
How much do you pay for it? How much is it?
Well, it's all on an Oyster card, so I'm only probably paying £6 a day, something like that, to go there and back. But it should probably be a tenner.
Okay.
And I'm being subsidised when I don't need it by people who haven't got a great deal of money. So a trim here to rail subsidies. Again, a very modest proposal. 10 billion, get down from 12.5 billion to 10 billion. Focus that better. Just saved you £2.5 billion.
2 more to go. So number 9, reduction in state spending in every government department by 5%. And you say this overlaps with the above reductions, but could be a way to tackle the whole issue head on. Savings would be just over, £60 billion a year.
Yeah. So one way of approaching it, I'm a bit sceptical about it, but I just wanted to put it on the table, is rather than sort of doing what they call, zero-based budgeting and sort of working out what are we going to jettison altogether, you send out a missive to every government department and you just say, you've got to find 5% of savings next year. Your budget is cut by 5%. Do whatever you need to. You decide how you find it. You decide what efficiencies you make. But next year, you're only getting 95p for every pound I gave you this year. That's about what the coalition government tried to do under David Cameron. Worked modestly. If you did that across the board, you would save £60 billion if you could pull that off. Where I want to be honest is I don't want to do any double accounting tricks myself because I've already made some savings to the NHS and the international aid budget. So if you wanted to do all of my 1 to 8, and then put number 9 on top, I'd say I'd probably save you 50 billion. If you don't like any of my 1 to 8, you can't really think what you want to cut, or maybe just go for my number 9. You would save 60 billion if you cut government expenditure in every department by 5%.
All right. Finally, number 10, freeze MPs' pay. I think lots of people will like this one. Freeze MPs' pay until the UK balances its budget, saving of about 1.8 million per annum. And you said you're showing this, you've included this for a reason.
Yeah, I included this to pick up on our interesting discussion yesterday, Vanessa, that often the popular cuts of let's not, help ex-prime ministers with their secretarial work or let's freeze MPs' salaries. You might want to do these things, but I just wanted to illustrate how it doesn't even touch the sides of the budgetary problem we've got. So if you froze MPs' pay, rather than it going up by, let's say, about £3,000 a year, you'd save about £1.8 million a year. And if you cut off all the ex-prime ministers from secretarial support, you'd probably save another £500,000 on top of that. And so if you want to do something that's really popular, great, but you're going to save £2.3 million, a tiny, tiny fraction. To be worried about these sort of things is a bit like worrying that there's a £10 note behind your sofa while your house is burning down. You might not want to lose the £10 note behind the sofa, but it is such a rounding error, it's barely worth thinking about.
So is really the word for everything you've said austerity? Is that what you're doing?
Well, I don't think it is austerity. I was rather annoyed when George Osborne called it that, because I think austerity is when you're living well within your means, when you're bringing in £10 an hour and you're only spending 9. You're being austere. We have done exactly the opposite in Britain. We have been living well beyond our means for 25 years now. The last time any government of any stripe balanced the budget was 2001. So, I mean, if this is austerity, I'd like to know what largesse looks like.
So would I. I'd love a bit of that. I think we'd all like to see that.
Well beyond our means. And I think we need to just to make things balance, we need to find £100 billion worth of savings fast. Now, I don't think that's austerity. I just think that's back to living within our means, because we have been living beyond them now for a quarter of a century.
Mark Littlewood, thank you very much indeed for obliging me so beautifully. That's Mark Littlewood's top 10 pointers for saving money and cutting spending.